Hey everybody, welcome back to another SUPboarder video. This week we're going to be having a look at two of the most popular boards from SIC. We're going to be looking at the Bullet 14 foot and the RS 14 foot as well. As the catalogue says, the RS is the faster, more racier board that's designed for open water and flat water paddling, but really geared up to more racers. The Bullet is designed for more open waters, maybe a bit of downwinding, maybe even a bit of surfing, light touring, fitness, and a little bit of racing. But what we really want to answer in this video is why these two boards are so different. What makes the RS faster in flat water? What makes the Bullet better for catching waves and downwinding? So the best way to talk about this is we're going to split the boards down and talk about each section together. We're going to talk about the deck shape, we're going to talk about the bottom of the board shape, we're going to talk about the nose shape, we're going to talk about the tail shape, and then we're going to talk about the rail shape. We're going to look at both of them at the same time, and then we're going to talk about why one board would be better than another one in certain conditions. So I'll give you a quick run through of the specifications of the boards that we've been using for a while now. Both of them are 14 foot long. The RS is the 26 wide version and the Bullet is the 27.25 wide version. SIC make these boards in lots of different constructions. The most common and the sort of standout construction is the SCC Plus E Negro, which we've been using the RS one and the Bullet here. And the volume of the board, well, this is a bit of an interesting one because the Bullet is a wider board, so it should have more volume, but the RS is a lot bigger in volume. The RS is 306 litres and the Bullet is 269. Just shows you how much thickness and how much more nose shape the RS has compared to the Bullet. Let's move on to talk about the sections of the board now. So let's talk about the deck shape first. The Bullet is a large flat area, not very recessed, and it goes right to the back towards the tail. The RS actually has a bigger deck standing area than the Bullet does, but it's way more recessed into the board. It's sunk down into the board and it goes right to the back of the tail, and you've got, because the tail is obviously a wider, which we're going to talk about in a minute, you've got more deck area to stand on back there. Right, so straight away, the RS, because it's sunk and recessed down, you get more stability for the actual width of the board, because remember the RS is slightly narrower than the Bullet. So the RS is a more stable board because of the deck shape being recessed and sunk, and then you've still got a nice big standing area that makes doing step back turns very easy on the RS compared to the Bullet, which is a much more thinner standing area, which is designed for more walking down the board and then using the board to trim in a sort of surf motion, not doing so many step back turns. So you can see straight away that the deck shape at the back is very different, and if you wanted to do step back turns and race maneuvers, the RS is going to be way better to cater for that. But because the Bullet around the standing area has less to sort of catch in your feet, there's no leashing point up at the front there, because you might be trimming up at the front to catch a downwinding wave, or if you're touring, trimming the board, or coming back, there's no drainage holes to get your feet caught on. It's a very simple, open deck pad that's very easy to walk around, up around that sort of midpoint standing area. Because when you're racing, if you're standing up here, you're standing up here and you're just paddling hard. But when you want to do your maneuvers, you're going to be at the back of the board and you've got more space to walk around and do those buoy turns. Now, looking at the bottom shape. Now, what I mean by looking at the bottom shape, really I'm talking about looking at the rock line, the curve of the board from front to the back. You can see on the shot below that the Bullet has way more nose rocker. It's got way more curve up at the nose than the RS. The RS is pretty much flat all the way to the tip of the nose where the nose wraps around. There you can see that the waves go under the board, the rockers, it's not going to catch on the waves. The Bullet is a much drier board than the RS. The RS has that sort of more wave piercing nose, which we'll talk about in a minute, but also it keeps the water line, keeps the full length of the board in the water. If you want to paddle fast, you've got to keep your full length board in the water at all times. If you're riding a 17 foot board, you want 17 foot of that in the water. 14 foot board, you want 14 foot of that in the water. Now some designs, they bring them up slightly, just help chop go underneath the nose of the board, but generally you want to keep much of the water line as possible. The RS has a small amount of tail kick at the back of the board, which is where it helps the open water paddling, where it helps the downwinding, and where it helps racing or using the board in choppy conditions, because you can trim the board a little bit at the back. The Bullet also has tail rocker, which is great for getting back and getting the nose up, but it hasn't really got as much because it's got quite a lot of nose kick, which is there to help downwinding, surfing, catching the bumps, riding the waves without the nose catching. There are subtle designs on the cross section of the board as well, like the RS has got the channel system that comes in at the bottom underneath. It generally just holds the water up underneath and pushes it back towards the fin, makes it a little bit quicker and a little bit easier again for the tracking. So we're moving on now, we're going to move on to the nose shape, but already the RS is the faster board, flatter, less rocker line, and more of the board in the water at all times. So moving up to the nose then, sort of carrying on from the rocker line, the Bullet is properly out of the water. It's more of a super-sized surfboard nose. It's designed to get you over the bumps when you're riding down little waves, and into chop it's not going to wave pierce, but it's going to push over the top of the chop if you're riding into wind. The RS is a wave piercing nose. It's designed to sort of push the water, use the full length of the water line as I just said, but have the water wrap over the nose and not really slow it down. So push into the wind, very effective at pushing into wind, these boards. You can also downwind with them, but you'll find that when you're riding waves and catching little bumps, a nose like the Bullet won't catch as much. It'll be much more out of the water, and it'll actually be easier to trim left and right on the board because of that, because the nose is bringing itself out. The nose on the RS is much more planted, much lower down in the water. You'll find that to get the nose up, you've got to get further back on the board and to use that rocker line to then trim the board when you're like doing downwinding situations or catching small waves. So a quick one on catching like surf and using these boards in the surf. If you took both the boards out in the surf, there is a big difference between the Bullet and the RS. Because of the nose and the rocker line, the Bullet is so much easier to surf on. It's very, very responsive. There's a little bit of that about the back tail shape, which we'll speak about in a minute, but really the nose shape, the rocker line, bringing the nose up so the water enters a little bit later makes the board way more user-friendly and easier to use in the surf. So if you're thinking about this board in the surf or downwinding or just catching more waves in general, the Bullet is going to be a much easier board. Moving on to tail shapes, completely different tail shapes, these two. Square cutoff on the RS and a more of a pintail with a tiny bit of cutoff on the Bullet. What is all that about? Well, the RS is there to hold you in a straight line, cut the release, make it as fast as possible so the water just shoots off the back of the board. Having a pintail on the Bullet means it's much better in faster conditions. So if you're running a wave downwind, it's much better at handling speed. But then also you can get back on the tail and you can trim the board very easily from left to right. It reacts very easy because of that pintail with a tiny square. If I was using the RS in a downwind or surf environment, it's going to be a little bit more cumbersome to trim left and right, and you're going to have to be a little bit more aggressive on your turning to actually get that board to respond. The Bullet, because of the pintail, it just reacts really quickly, really smoothly, and it's just very, very responsive. And that's really all to do with the pintail at the back of the board. Downside of the pintail is it's not so fast. It doesn't release the water as quick. It drags the water down the rails and releases it at the last point. As was said, the RS is completely different. The water goes down the rails, getting near the end, and gets cut off, and the water just releases off the tail. So therefore, you have a faster outline profile. The outline shape of the tail is way faster on the RS. Rail shape. Now this makes up quite a big one, and it sort of adds to every single part that we've talked about so far. The rail shape on the RS is much fatter, much higher, and much squarer. Squarer, again, it's good at releasing water. It's good at shredding the water off the tail and doesn't wrap around so much. A rounder rail gives you more grip, a bit more control, but it's not so fast. So the RS is designed again to shrug the water off and get rid of that water as quick as possible. But it's a much higher rail, it's a much thicker rail, and therefore, because that gives you what Bryce Dyer was saying in some of the other videos he's done lately, good secondary stability, good secondary stability, so you can rock from left to right. And the RS is actually a very stable board, and it's clear to see that the RS in a 26 wide is probably as stable as the Bullet in a 27.25 wide, and that's because of the nice high rails, boxier rails, and they just hold you really upright when you're rocking. And if interesting one, if you're doing that sort of test on the board like the RS, you can really see how the drainage holes work really efficiently on the recessed deck. You can clearly see it on the video. The water shoots out the drainage hole, and that's why they're there, because the water will end up sitting in the lowest part of the deck, which is where you're standing, and it's just going to slow you down. And the rail shape on the Bullet is fairly similar up near the shoulders up here, but as you get near the back, it's much softer. It hasn't got such a sharper rail, and it's a lot thinner than the RS. The RS is thick all the way to the tail. So when you're standing back, it's better for the surfing, a bit better for the trim, it gives you a better feeling when you're moving from left to right, but generally using the boards in the sort of downwind or the surf environment is really what that back and the rail shape is geared up for. So that's an interesting little look at why certain parts of boards make a difference to the riding feel, the characteristics of the board, and what you're going to do with them. You can clearly see that the SIC RS is going to be the faster board. It's much flatter. It's really designed at keeping the full water line length in the water and going as fast as possible. Squarer rails give you a really good secondary stability, and it's good at releasing the water as fast as possible at the back of the board. The Bullet, a little bit more rocker up in the nose there, much more pulled out of the water. It's going to let the water hit the nose a little bit further back on the board. Way easier for then trimming the board left and right, getting over bumps and riding down waves. Softer rails, again nice for trimming and moving around the board for surfing. Pulled into the back of the tail, and a load of control at the back of the tail there because of that pulled in tail. The Bullet is so much more comfortable in surf and chop and basically moving downwind with waves or bump. It doesn't even matter if it's this big or 20 foot, the Bullet has so much more control than the RS. Which one should you buy if you're looking for a certain board? Well, here's the big one. If you're into racing and you want to try and paddle fast, you've got to be looking at something like the RS. It's just a faster board. You're still going to be able to downwind it. You're still going to be able to flat water paddle it and paddle into wind in chop. No problem. The RS is the faster board, but it's really for the racer. For me, I'm not really into racing so much. I would go straight towards the Bullet. I love the downwinding. I love river paddling. I love touring. I love fishing. The Bullet is the one. I can go anywhere as I could do with the RS, but if I go downwinding and catch waves and catch bumps, the Bullet is so much more controllable and so much funner to actually use. So there we go, there's the SUPboarder comparison between the SIC Bullet and the SIC RS. A lot of stuff to talk about in that video. I hope the way we broke it down with 11 sections worked well for you, and also you can apply this to other boards. Remember, this isn't just for SIC, but this does apply to lots of different boards that you're going to see across the market. Any questions and comments, as always, please let us know. Give us a thumbs up if you like it. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time on SUPboarder or SUPboarder Pro.